Yeah, actually. Hello there, lovely people. It's Alex from Nintendo Life here, and yes, as the title suggests, I've only bloomin' played Sonic Frontiers, which admittedly at this point in time is not like an enormous claim or anything. Yes, I was attending EGX, and whilst I was there, I saw numerous games and saw Sonic Frontiers there. Admittedly, not the Switch version, but I thought, you know what? A lot of people have been saying a lot of things about this game. It's time I had some opinions of my own. So after chatting with some lovely people in the queue of the TikTok area, Sonic Frontiers was there. They had their own stand as well, but the TikTok queue was a lot shorter, even though literally everyone in the queue was there for Sonic Frontiers, which was kind of amusing. No, I'm sorry, TikTok staff. No one was there for Multiverses. And I got to play for about 20 minutes or so, I think the demo was, and I'm gonna give you my opinions. Pretty standard stuff. But anyway, that's more than enough waffling. Let's dive right into things. So, I do have to open this by saying, unfortunately, I was not allowed to capture footage. So, what you're going to be seeing is not my gameplay, it's going to be B-roll and trailers and stuff like that, just so that you're not looking at this the entire time. So I opened up with a cutscene. Sonic was like, oh, you know, he's just on the ground and he's getting up, and there's this strange, mysterious voice saying something along the lines of, and you're going to get this a lot, you're going to realize that I use the gameplay that I capture to reference things later on, which I can't do. But there's this voice saying, Sonic, you're the first creature ever to escape cyberspace, or something like that. Again, it's probably not cyberspace. I am terribly sorry. And the cutscene goes on, there's a bit of nattering, and then you're thrown straight into it. And it was kind of a walled-off area, I would say overall. It was open world, as it were, but I was clearly in the tutorial area and kind of funneled down sort of a certain path, which makes sense for a tutorial area. Even Breath of the Wild kind of does that a bit. The tutorial messages popped up, taught me the mechanics and everything like that. And the first thing I noticed is that compared to a lot of previous Sonic games, this is a lot more complicated, like a lot more complicated. It's not like Monster Hunter or anything like that, but comparatively, there's a lot more going on. And you know what? Even though the teaser gave it away, I actually really enjoyed my time with it. But I went through and it was like, hey, you do a homing attack like this, and I, took out all the enemies and stuff like that. And there were all these things like these, rails and springs and stuff and boost pads which looked really quite out of place. And so did Sonic, to be honest, in the entire area. But I think that they kind of explain it. I mean, I only got one cutscene, or maybe two or three, but either way, nothing major. I wasn't given any, substantial story stuff. But from what I can tell, from what I played, Sonic is not meant to be here, as it were. You are the first creature to escape cyberspace or whatever. So Sonic isn't meant to be in this world, and presumably the stuff that's in and around, the rails and the rings and all that, they're not meant to be here either. Which isn't an amazing explanation for it, but it gives it some reason. It grounds things, and it makes it kind of feel a little bit more understandable. It gives it a little bit more context. It's not a major thing, but it's something that I genuinely appreciated. Then I came up against my first it's not really a mini boss, but it's a larger enemy. And the easiest comparison I can give to all of the larger enemies that I fought, which was 2, was just like a ninja, I think it was called, was the first one, and the second one was like a tower. The ninja and the tower both kind of felt like, I want to say, kind of like bosses from the Sonic Adventure series. I would say the ninja one was more like a Sonic Adventure 1 boss, and more like, one of the mini bosses. Not as easy as Knuckles, don't get me wrong, but even so, it sort of felt like, it felt substantial, rather than being something like Sonic Heroes, where nearly all the enemies require multiple hits, and I found that kind of trying personally. It felt sort of, they were more sort of substantial enemies. It felt like an event when you came across one, at least this early in the game. I can't speak for later on, of course. And the tower especially, because you had to do the Psy loop, I think it was called, where you run in a circle, hold a button. And when I first saw that in the gameplay that was released beforehand, and that's probably what you're going to be seeing, I thought to myself, oh god, that's going to be really awkward and stuff like that. But it actually works really well because the tower, it's required. So there's like these sections you got to remove and stuff like that. And so I ran around and I thought to myself, oh, I'm going to have to do like this awkward, like sort of smooth circle. But you lock on. I mean, you don't have to, but it really makes sense to lock on to the target. So you just end up holding left or right and you end up making this perfect little circle. And you can like wiggle around if you need to move it, you know, avoid attacks or anything like that. But it made the process actually really fluid. It's still kind of bizarre how different the experience was compared to other Sonic games. And believe me, that's a good thing. The combat as well, when I saw the gameplay footage, it was just like, oh, you just jump up and you just bang, bang, bang and things like that. And whilst it's not a lot more complicated than that, it's because you're making the decisions and because the enemies are attacking back as well, and you can just like parry those attacks, but you have to make a judgment. It's not like super deep and complicated or anything like that, but it feels surprisingly satisfying. I don't know whether that's just because my expectations going into Frontiers were not great. I'm not gonna lie. I've been burnt so many times with Sonic in the past, but it was genuinely quite interesting. As I say, nothing outlandish, nothing out of this world, and I think to see it visually, it looks quite dull, but when you're actually, and I know so many people have said this before, and I'm hopefully gonna, you know, sort of try and explain myself better than that, but it feels different when you've actually got your hands on it. The best comparison that I can think of is if you look at something like Splatoon 3 footage, you know, you just see someone playing and it's not competitive and it's just kind of like the standard gameplay that Nintendo puts out. It looks a little bit, not necessarily slow, but a little bit simple, you know, sort of run, swim in the ink, you know, it doesn't look super exciting from the outside. But then when you actually get your hands on it, you realize, oh my god, you know, I'm doing a lot more. Because you're not experiencing it passively, you're experiencing it actively. Even something that's relatively, arguably straightforward and something that looks mundane, it's much more exciting to actually be doing it yourself. And that absolutely applies to Frontiers. I'm sure if I could watch my gameplay back, I'd look at it and think, oh, I was a bit slow there. Could I have been a bit snappier, a bit faster, a bit more fluid and stuff like that? But in the moment, I'm not thinking about that. You know, I'm not analyzing my footage. I'm experiencing the game. And it's not a good thing to try and describe. And it definitely sounds like a cop-out, you know, sort of, oh, it's better when you get your hands on it. But genuinely, it is. One thing that did surprise me is running around. You know, you've got the boost mechanic, which, thank Christ, is on a trigger now. It was just on, well, the equivalent of ZR, but it was an Xbox controller, so RT. Why did I have to think about that? Which means you get full camera control at the same time, and you can jump and boost very easily rather than kind of having to roll your thumb or something. You can move around the camera, move around Sonic, and boost all at the same time completely independently, which was really, really nice. And it feels weirdly good. Like, the thing that threw me off at first is that Sonic overall, compared to previous games, doesn't move that fast, and it's not as momentum based. But the land that you're in doesn't, well, I don't know, but it feels like it wouldn't benefit that much from a purely momentum-based mechanics. You know, something like Sonic Adventure 2, for example, or Sonic Adventure 1, even more so. It very much encourages you and kind of forces you to maintain control, which is something, you know, rather than, you know, sort of the boost games, which, you know, they have their positive points as well. Don't think that I'm knocking on the boost games or the boost formula overall. But when you boost, you have to surrender control because you're going so fast, you can't reasonably be expected to react to things. So enemies just get blown aside, and, you know, as long as you're jumping and you have these big long straights and you can jump over gaps very easily, you know, you're not tested that much. It's kind of it's not an auto button, but it's nearly that. And that is flat out not the case in Frontiers. It's, I would say, closer to the run mechanic in Lost World overall, but thankfully it's faster. Like, normal speed does not feel super sluggish, it just feels more controlled. Whereas boost feels faster. And that carried over to the, like this, I keep saying cyberspace, and I'm really not sure that's what it's called, but like the sort of, you go in and it's like an old Sonic level, you know, like an old 3D Sonic level. It's kind of given context, you know, it's kind of like, whoa, it's a crazy sort of digital space, and there's all sort of like glitchiness going on and stuff like that, which again gives more context to what would otherwise, you know, in previous Sonic games just be like, hey, these things just exist somehow and are perfectly reasonable for Sonic. I don't think Sonic needs that, but I still appreciate that they've given it a bit of context. And I actually initially just started trying to play it like a 3D boost game, and mate, that doesn't work. It's a little bit more precise. The boost is not as much of a just, you know, sort of hold and you'll run through the level kind of thing. You still have to react, and the boost just flat out isn't as fast. I actually ended up falling off several times because I was expecting the mechanics and the physics to be exactly the same as something like Sonic Forces or Sonic Generations, you know, or certain sections of colors. But it's not. It is quite a different kind of way to play, which definitely took me by surprise, and I felt like I couldn't sort of like just take the skills that I've acquired from those games and apply them into Frontiers. But I don't think it's a bad thing. It meant that this more traditional style of 3D Sonic environment was less about spectacle and more about platforming. It did feel a little bit sluggish at times and not quite as snappy as I was hoping. I suppose because I was then trying to apply like my Sonic Adventure 2 knowledge and skills into that, and it's not as snappy as that. It's a little bit more based on momentum, kind of like Sonic Adventure, but also not as snappy as Sonic Adventure. Sonic Adventure felt quite slippery at times, which was kind of fun, but probably wouldn't fly these days. And I've got to say, even though it was only a short period of time that I played, and it was basically just those two things, you know, sort of the open world where I fought the ninja and the tower especially was really good fun, and surprisingly tough for an early, though I just realized I did put it on the hardest difficulty. And then this kind of cyberspace Sonic level, honestly, I had a lot of fun. I am not sure whether it's going to be as much fun long term. I don't know, because it's so different, it's so new. I'm excited to, you know, with the concept that it will be that much fun long term, and later on in the game you'll potentially get more moves, I think, because I started off without the Psy-Loop and then I acquired it. So I imagine there's going to be even more moves to get later on and add more complexity, more movement options and things like that, and that is really exciting. But at the same time, I've been burnt so many times with 3D Sonic games that I'm inherently a little bit skeptical. And I hope so much that I am wrong about that. And I feel like I will be wrong about that mentality, but at the same time, I cannot stop that nagging doubt, because I've been burnt so many times. I've said it before. I've been burnt so many times. I've said it 3 times now. But from what little I played, I am thoroughly excited. You know, finally something different in Sonic, and not only different, but different and good and fun, and, you know, sort of completely different. Also, another thing, Sonic barely says a word, which, you know, sort of, I like Sonic's attitude and stuff like that. You know, he's a cool, hip dude and all that sort of thing, and he's always making quippity quip, 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 quip. But he wasn't doing that. He was kind of really quite reserved, all things considered. The opening cutscene was kind of mature, and not in a Shadow the Hedgehog kind of mature way, where it's like what a 13-year-old would consider to be mature, but in a genuinely kind of more mature way. It's still cartoony, it's still kind of fun and fantastical, but it just seems to be taking itself a little bit more seriously. I'm not sure I heard a single Sonic quip throughout the whole thing. And I don't want there to not be Sonic quips. I want them to be few and far between and make them more fun when they do happen. Although something that did make me laugh was Sonic's death cry, which, you know, sort of in past games has always been like, whoa, you know, kind of goofy and, you know, that. But in this one, when I first heard it, it really made me laugh, because it's more like a sort of a, ah, only weirdly quiet, so more like, you know, it's the sort of noise that somebody would actually make if they were falling to their death. Admittedly, I assume Sonic knows he's coming back, but still probably painful. It would have been so easy for them to put a thing in where every time Sonic hits a spring or does a really big bounce or something, he goes, woohoo! Or something like that, like he did in the go-kart thing in Sonic Adventure. But they don't. They're really reserved, and they let the player kind of imprint themselves a little bit on Sonic, which hasn't been done in a 3D Sonic game in a very long time. And Sonic's a big personality, and I don't think that they've entirely removed that, but I think it allows you to just enjoy the world and not get so frustrated with hearing the same lines of dialogue over and over again, which, 2 thumbs up. I'm really excited. I'm really excited to play more of it and really see what the meat of the game is going to be like. But from what I've played, yeah, this has serious potential. It's still too early to say, oh yeah, this is easily going to be the best Sonic's going to be in, 15 years or something like that. But at the same time, there's a lot of potential here. And if they live up to it, it's going to be a damn good time. But that's just what I think. What do you think? Have you played it? Did you get to play it at EGX? Did you also manage to meet a nice man called Nick? I told you I'd do it. Let us know in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, then why don't you run around that subscribe button once and then release the button and ooh, things happen. Damage. Ooh. And be sure to check out NintendoLife.com for all sorts of lovely Nintendo-related content. Thank you again for watching. Bye-bye.